that. Listen, at one of my previous churches, we tried to incorporate a tambourine once, and we had the deacons would rotate, and they would come up and give the announcements after the songs and stuff like that, kind of what we do here. But after the first week that we introduced the tambourine at this church, one of the deacons came up and gave the announcements, and he stood up there and he goes, "I thought we were going to bring out the snakes and everything." I thought to myself, thanks a lot. We're not doing that ever again. Okay, so we've got a lot of announcements, but they all are wrapped up into like one big idea. Okay? It is my understanding that Brevard County is the worst as far as COVID cases, COVID deaths in the entire United States. And so what we are going to do, and listen, I do not take this lightly. We had a meeting this morning with several of the deacons and everything. And so we are going to cancel Monday morning Bible study. We're going to cancel the Wednesday prayer meeting. And I talked to Carol, and just because we're canceling the other two, we ought to cancel the women's Bible study for the next 2 weeks. Now, here's the problem with doing this. I don't think it's going to matter. The reality of what we are dealing with right now is that I don't think this is my personal opinion. I don't think this is going to get any better in 2 weeks' time, in a month's time. I think that we are in this for the long haul. I think this thing keeps morphing and changing and doing different things, and I'm not positive that the CDC can even keep up with what it's doing. It just seems like we're playing catch up all the time. That is a scary place to be when we're talking about a deadly virus, right? And so, because of the age of the congregation, and just all kinds of different things, I would much rather err on the side of caution and be safe than sorry. The other thing I want to say, and we talked about this in the meeting this morning, is that you guys need to make wise choices. And when I say you guys, I mean all of us. We need to make wise choices. This virus is everywhere. And I don't care if you are an anti-vaxxer or if you don't even think COVID is a real thing, whatever. That is your opinion, and you're entitled to that opinion. I'm not saying that you can't hold those opinions. But what I am saying is that we need to be aware of the people around us. We need to be aware of the environments that we are putting ourselves in, because every environment that we put ourselves in increases the chance that you could get this virus and take it to someplace else. Here, home, anywhere. Okay? So we need to make wise choices as a congregation, not to go out of our way to do things that's going to endanger you, but also all of us collectively. Right? That is where I stand on this. And, you could, depending on what you look at and what you read and what news station you listen to, even getting vaccinated does not keep you from, one, getting the virus or transmitting it to somebody else. That's just the truth. Now, it does help you as far as you're not as sick and things like that. So whatever you decide about that is totally up to you. I'm not telling you what to do, because it's not my place to do that. But you guys got to be careful. We have got to be careful of who we come in contact with, especially in this county, because it is literally everywhere. We've got to be safe. We've got to be smart. And part of that for this church, for this congregation, is that we are just going to take a 2-week break. We're not shutting down Sunday morning. I don't want you guys to hear what I'm not saying. Is that Sunday morning is going to stay open. But you guys need to show up if you feel safe to do so. If you don't feel safe coming, then don't come. Stay home, watch somebody on TV, get online and watch us live. If you got Facebook, watch us live later on YouTube. Do whatever makes you feel safe, and we're okay with that. I would encourage you to, as you walk in, wear your mask as you walk in. It's not going to kill you. We're not infringing on any kind of blah, blah, blah. We just hope that we just want to encourage you to wear your mask when you walk in. That's all. Once you sit down, you can take it off and you don't have to wear it the whole time. You can see that we're not having the choir out of an abundance of caution. Better safe than sorry. We're not having the choir. The choir practice is not going to happen for at least a couple of weeks. So we're just taking a step back, seeing how this all plays out for the next 2 weeks, and we'll make adjustments after that, right? And we're okay with doing that. So we just need to, and listen, I don't want to do this any more than you guys do. But I also don't want to do any more funerals this year. And so that's my driving force. Okay? Cecil is back in the hospital with COVID again. And so Gene thinks that he may have got it at the dialysis center that he goes to. So he had COVID. I don't know that he had the vaccination shots or anything, but he had COVID, a bad case of COVID. I don't want that to happen anymore. Right? So let's just be smart. Let's just be wise about how we do things. And I'm pretty straightforward with things, right? And if you don't agree with what we're doing, I really don't care. This is how we're doing it. This is how we're handling it. I don't want to hear a bunch of griping and complaining or calling people on the phone and things like that. This is how we're handling it. We don't know what we're doing either. No more than anybody else does. So this is the best way that we feel that we can protect everybody that's here. Okay? So I'm going to move on from that. And so I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep because I never felt comfortable with how I was going to end the sermon today. Okay? So I was laying there. I could not turn my mind off and everything. So what I have here, I've got 2 envelopes right here. Later on in the service, you are going to pick how the service is going to end. Because I didn't want to take that responsibility on. Because I just couldn't get a right answer. So later on in the service, you guys are going to have the opportunity to pick how the service ends, how the sermon ends. And so that way you'll get out of it exactly what you voted for, and it's off me, right? And so we're going to do that. And, I've never done that before. I've never had the congregation vote on the end of the sermon. So we'll see how that goes. We may never, ever do it again. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. But so I want you to think, am I going to vote for 1 or am I going to vote for 2? That's the only decision you have to make, and you'll be making that here shortly, okay? So let me pray. We've got a lot of folks. I want to pray for Sue Gorman because she had her surgery. All indications is that the surgery went well. But we need to focus on no infections. She needs to be done with that. She needs to move on with her life and everything like that. We need to pray for Cecil. I don't know how bad he really is. But regardless, his underlying conditions, it doesn't matter how bad he is. He's in a very high risk category. So we need to pray for him for sure. And we just got a lot of folks that are sick and doing everything. And I will mention that today, Lori and I have been married 29 years. So that we've got that going on. And so when I went, because Lori isn't leaving the house yet or anything, just taking precautions. So when I went grocery shopping yesterday, I bought us a little anniversary card and a little gift, so we did that. And anyway, all right, enough about all that. Let me pray, and then we'll move on. Lord, I just thank you so much for the freedom that we have in this country to do this, to meet, to worship you, to learn more about your word. Lord, I do want to pray for all the folks in Afghanistan, the entire situation there. Lord, we pray that you would protect those that need to get out of there, that want to get out of there. Well, I've heard reports of missionaries and Christians already being killed for their faith. And Lord, I just pray that you would blind the eyes of the enemy so they can reach safety. However you can work that out. Lord, I do pray for Sue right now. I pray for her knee. I pray that there just won't be any even an ounce of infection in her leg again. And that she can heal and get back to life that she loves. And I do pray for Cecil right now, and I'm not sure exactly how serious his situation is, but we know of his health condition. And so any illness for Cecil is going to be serious. And Lord, I just pray that you would watch over him, protect him, give him peace and comfort as he goes through this, because this is his second round. And Lord, I just pray that you would encourage him, and that we would do what we can in order to accomplish that as well. I just thank you for the members of this church and their understanding, their love for each other, as we just try to figure out what to do. And Lord, I just thank you again for everything you're doing at this church. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen.
Can everybody stand? We're going to sing hymn 406, The Solid Rock.
will surprise you what the Lord has done. Now your blessing may go one by one. Now your blessing, see what God has done. Now your blessings, name them one by one. Now your many blessings, see what God has done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Down the many blessings every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Down your blessings, name them one by one. Down your blessings, see what God has done. Down your blessings, name them one by one. Down your many blessings, see what God has done. When you look at others with their land and gold, think that Christ has promised you his wealth untold. Down the many blessings money cannot buy, your reward in heaven or your home on high. Now your blessings name them one by one. Now your blessings, see what God has done. Now your blessings, name them one by one. Now your many blessings, see what God has done. So amid the times that whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Down the many blessings angels will attend, they'll comfort, give you till your journey is end. Down your blessings name them one by one. Down your blessings, see what God has done. Down your blessings, name them one by one. Down your many blessings, see what God has done. Down your blessings, name them one by one. Down your blessings, see what God has done. Down your blessings, name them one by one. Down your many blessings, see what God has done.
All right. So even in very uncertain times like we've got going on right now, it is extremely important to count our blessings, right? If there's ever a time that we should do it, it ought to be now. And so as we look forward to an uncertain future, as we try to navigate through this stuff and everything, always take time. Always take time to reflect on what God has done for you in the past. Thank Him for that. Don't take it for granted. And move forward as we look to do that thing. So, if you look up on the screen, it says Life of Jesus, Matthew 6:19 through either 23 or 24. That is what you are going to decide for us today. Now, the reason that is so important is that if you include, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but I want you to understand why we're doing this. If you include verse 24 into 19 through 24, in my opinion, it changes the entire focus or the entire point of the passages that we're going to read. If you don't include that, it takes on a whole new meaning that is much broader than you've probably ever heard before. And so we're going to see, determining on how you vote in a little bit will determine on the main point of the sermon in a later time, because both points, they are very valid, and maybe regardless of what you pick, we might touch on the other one, because what we're talking about today is treasures in heaven. Every pretty much, I can't remember something that didn't go this way, but pretty much every sermon that I have heard on this passage has to do with money. It has to do with, acquiring new cars, a bigger house, more land, stuff. My problem with that is that, well, one, when the scriptures were originally written, there were no chapters and verses. Did you know that? That is not original to the text. In fact, there was very little, if any, punctuation, and so it was more or less a long letter that was written, and all this, the chapters and the verses and different things like that were added later just to help us navigate through it easier. Okay? And so, if we stop at verse 23 as we go through this, it changes the entire meaning, I feel, of treasures in heaven. And so we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So we've been talking about the life of Jesus, and this is, believe it or not, you may believe it because it's like, man, are we ever going to get done with this? But the life of Jesus, the series that we are in, this is week 22 of going through chronological order of the life of Jesus. Now, we're now in the Sermon on the Mount, and I think we've done about 6 or 7 sermons on the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount began with various blessed are those, right? Remember it starts out, blessed are the meek, blessed are, because great is your reward in heaven. Okay, blessed are those that act this way, treat people this way, your heart is this way, your spirit is this way. Blessed are those because your reward is in heaven. Then Jesus talks about our righteousness being greater than that of the scribes and the Pharisees to enter the kingdom of heaven. So again, it talks about great are your rewards in heaven. Blessed are those that act a certain way and treat others a certain way and all that. Blessed are those, your rewards are in heaven. Then it says, then he talks about your righteousness has to be better than the scribes and the Pharisees to enter the kingdom of heaven. He continues with the commands to get a handle on our attitudes and our emotions. Do not become angry at a brother and sister. Resist lustful desires that lead to adultery and divorce. Your character must be one that your word can be trusted. Remember, we talked about all those different things. And do not become vengeful or hate your enemy. He follows all those blessed are, because your rewards are in heaven. Your righteousness needs to be more better. I'm just going to say that. We'll leave that in there. It has to be more better than the Pharisees and the scribes. Then in chapter 6, he tells everyone to resist getting pats on the back, what we talked about last week, from people by this world, like giving to the needy, praying and fasting in private, because when you do these things in this world and for the approval of men, again, it has to do with your heart. That is what this entire sermon so far has been about. The condition of your heart. The why behind everything that you do. And so he continues, and he says that if you do these things for a pat on the back, for approval of men, wherever you are around here, then surely that is all you are going to get. Because we talked about there's no double dipping in heaven. You are not going to get, if your goal, I need to be clear about this because somebody asked me about this last week. If your goal is to do good works for somebody to be recognized by the world, then that's all you are going to get after you do it. Somebody asked me, well, what if I do something and, the person or the whatever, they end up recognizing me some way. Or the church recognizes me for giving a certain amount of money or all these different things. The heart is what matters. Why did you do what you did? If it is to get recognition from this world, then when you get that, that's all you get. There's not going to be when you face God and He goes through your life and you're sitting up there and you feel pretty good about yourself. I mean, you're up there, you're standing before God, and you remember all those times that you gave $1 to somebody standing on the corner. Or you gave, to the church because they had a need, and you made it known that you gave a certain amount of money to get new hymnals or whatever it was. Because people do it all the time in church. And you're sitting, but God, don't you know how much money I gave to the church? Yeah, so does everybody else. And you got your name on a pew, or you got your name on X, Y, and Z. Super job, that's all you get. Now, let's move on. What else did you do that nobody knows about? Right? It's your heart that matters. The why behind anything that you do. It's your motives. And I want you to, I need you to understand this. It 100% depends on your attitude. It's not dependent on circumstances. It's not dependent on your environment. It is 100% dependent on your attitude, your motives, the why behind everything you do. And here's the thing, only you and God know that. Now, here's what I need you to caution you about. That means you don't know why somebody else did something, right? I mean, that goes both ways. We shouldn't go around, what Christians are very good at doing, judging other people's actions based on like 30 seconds of their life that you saw at that moment, right? We're really good at doing that. We do not know why somebody does something. Only they and God know that. So keep that to yourself, right? Whatever you think the motive for something that somebody did, you don't know. They and God know why they did it. So we need to keep that in mind. That wasn't even my notes, so that is totally free for this morning. And he takes even a little further. So Jesus, he's continued talking about this entire time. And then he takes it even a little bit further in his explanation and what I feel his expectation for every single one of us is. So he's led up to this point, and he's laid down the new law. I mean, we could call it that, but he's laid down these commands with the expectation that if you follow this, you will. Here's examples of how to be more righteous than the scribes and the Pharisees, so that you can enter into the kingdom of heaven. That's what this whole thing is about. So as we continue looking into this, I want you to keep that in your mind. So let's go to Matthew chapter 6. We're going to start in verse 19. We're going to read down to verse 21, and then we'll talk about a couple of things. So Matthew 6, verse 19, all the way down to 21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to tell you something. When I started studying for this, and I really got stuck on where I was going to go and what it would, what we're going to talk about and everything. And I don't do this all the time. I actually rarely do it. I asked Lori, what does this mean to you? If you took the idea of money out of these verses, what would that mean to you? And so we started talking about the word treasure. And she said, you know what that brings to mind? Is when Mary was approached by the angel saying that she was going to have the child of God. And she treasured that in her heart. And how important that was to her and the experience. And the fact that she kept it to herself, right? And so if we take the idea, if we take the focus off money, when we start reading these passages, it takes on an entirely new life if we do that. Your why behind, I need you guys to hear this. I need you to, don't think about lunch, don't think about anything right now. Your why behind everything you do, I need you to get this. Your why behind everything you do, every emotion that you show, every act you participate in, every good deed, every act of prayer and fasting that we talked about earlier, everything you do has eternal consequences. Do you realize that? Do you realize how you react in certain situations, certain circumstances? That has eternal consequences. Because if we don't act right, if we don't obey just the chapter, the chapter and a half in Matthew that we've gone through with the Sermon on the Mount, if we just take this lightly and we don't obey this, that's a big deal. It has eternal consequences. Because you are either doing it for benefits here on earth, or you are doing it for rewards in heaven. You cannot and will not have it both ways. God does not allow that. Do you realize, and I've said it before, but do you realize that when you stand before God, when your last day here on earth, and you take your last breath and all that, you are going to stand before God and give an account for everything you have done on this earth. Every word, every action, every thought. You are going to be held accountable for everything that you have done on this earth. Everything you do down here has eternal consequences. And we have got to understand that if we are going to get a better grasp of what I feel Jesus is trying to tell us in these passages, because it's very easy just to say, oh, this is about money, and if I don't, store up, a big bank account and I don't have a lot of money, which we're all like, well, we qualify for that because none of us have hardly any money. So we're good. I'm not storing up anything on earth because I don't have squat. So I'm meeting the biblical guidelines of getting into heaven. But man, if we take money out of the equation, because that's the lowest denominator. If we take that out of the equation, and we ponder, just for a minute, ponder what true treasures Jesus is talking about here, it would change our entire mind about the whole thing. And the why behind everything that you do, again, every word, every attitude, every action, everything. The why behind that determines the reward in heaven or the lack thereof. And again, you and God know the real why. You're not going to get up there and say, well, God, I really didn't mean it that way. Because he's going to look you square in the eye and he's going to say, yes, you did. In fact, in your heart, you were killing them. And you're going to say, well, no, you misunderstood what I said. Do you think that's going to work? This is very, very serious. What we're talking about today is so serious that everything we do has eternal consequences. The why behind your actions show where your treasure truly is. Now, we are going to vote. We're going to vote on the rest of the sermon. Okay? And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let you guys decide, are we going to stop at verse 23, or are we going to go down to verse 24? That's what you guys are deciding. Now, we're going to cast lots, because that's the biblical thing to do, right? Which means you don't even know what's in these envelopes. Right? So we're going to leave it up to God to decide how this is going to go down. Okay? Because here's what I believe is that regardless of how this ends, it's a biblical truth that we have to hear. So we're not going to lose either way. Okay? And so I've never done this, so we're going to see how it works. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. If you want me to take the verse, and what I've got in here is I've got pieces of paper that say 23 and 24. I think that's what we're voting on. Is that verse 23 and 24. So when you tell me what number, I'm going to pull that piece of paper out, and that's how far we are going to go today. And that's going to determine the point of the message. Okay? So here we go. If you, and we're just going to raise your hand, okay? It's going to be super simple, very scientific. If you want me to open up envelope number 1, and we're going to use that verse, raise your hand. Envelope number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Linda, you can vote for yourself. You don't have to look at Gary and vote his way. 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. If you want to vote for number 2, go ahead and raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. We have envelope number 2. I'm going to put number 1 down there. And we're going to open this up. And I am going to pull out verse 23. So this is the message that God wants all of us to hear this morning. So here we go. And you better probably buckle up your seatbelt, because this might get a little rough, depending on how it goes. So let's start. We're going to read verses 22 and 23. Matthew chapter 6, verse 22 and 23. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Now, here's what I'm assuming that is going on right now, is that you might be thinking to yourself, Pastor Brian, how can you use this passage, the last 2 verses that we read, and even relate them to being angry with your brother and sister. You might be asking, how can one verse make such a difference? How does the idea of treasures in heaven relate to our prayer life, right? How does it relate to your righteousness? How does it relate to our blessings? I am so glad you asked that question. And that's what I like about you. You guys know the right questions to ask to get us on the right track. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to give you an example. It's going to be fairly broad, but we're going to see how does our life relate to our treasure on this earth or in heaven. Okay? Now, hypothetically, right? I'm sure none of us has experienced any of these situations. Hypothetically, let's say that you're at church and someone says something to you, about you. Let's say that they talk about your hair. Oh my goodness. They talk about your clothes. They talk about, whatever. They talk about the ministry that you're involved in, that you're trying to get up off the ground. They say something about you, and it is less than positive. Right? Again, this is hypothetical. Right? It could even, I don't want you to limit our conversation here to even church. It could be a coworker. It could be a family member. It could be a spouse that has said something to you that it makes you upset, right? You take offense to something that has been said or done to you. And hypothetically, again, I'm just making this up. Hypothetically, you get so upset at that person about the things that they said or did about you that you get so upset that you go through a time period. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 10 days, it could be 10 years, that you can't even look at that person. You can't even talk to that person. You have broken off communication because of something that was said or done to you, about you, all these types of things, right? So again, totally hypothetical. I don't think anybody in here can relate to anything I'm saying so far, right? And yet when all the dust settles and all the emotions are cleared away, you might realize that the only thing that was truly damaged was your pride. You know what? Believe it or not, Lori and I have our share of arguments. Just because there's pastor in my title does not mean that we don't have our own emotions and we talk about things at a loud level at some points in our life, right? But here's the thing that we have said both to each other at times. How many times have you had an argument with somebody? Could be in your household, it could be a coworker, it could be whatever. How many times have you had an argument that 24 hours later, you can look back and see that it did not matter at all? It did not change anything. It did not affect the world as we see it. We just got our feelings hurt. And so we blow up. We got our toes stepped on, so we blow up. We got our pride damaged a little bit, so we blow up. We get angry. We get upset. We don't talk to our spouse for 2 days. Now, some of you, this could be age-related, but 2 days later, you don't even remember what you were arguing about. I want you to understand And even just, I want you to grasp this idea that when we get upset about something here on this earth, especially something that 24 hours, 48 hours, 1 week later, a month later, it doesn't change anything. Nothing changed because you got upset. Nothing changed because this, that, and the other thing. Do you understand that your treasure is here on this earth? Because you are so concerned about getting what you deserve. You're so concerned about being treated the way you ought to be treated, right? You're so concerned about how somebody else sees you, your pride. You're so concerned about all this other stuff, all this external stuff here on this earth, and you get visibly angry and upset about X, Y, and Z, that 24 hours later doesn't mean anything, really. Your treasure is here. Because you're not concerned. Here's what I believe, and I need you to understand this, and I think I've said this before. I've got to take a breath because I'm getting lightheaded. Here's what I've said before. Where was I going with that? Don't you hate that? So, what in the world? I'll get back to my notes and maybe it'll come back to me.
Old age.
It is. It's contagious. I want to go back to Matthew chapter 5 real quick because I wanted to read something we've already read, we've already talked about, but I want to relate this passage to the rewards in heaven. Matthew chapter 5, and I want to start at verse 38. Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. Because I want to give you a tangible, I want you to think about this idea that your attitude matters. Your attitude, where your heart is, the why behind absolutely everything you do has eternal consequences. So here we go. 38 through 42. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your cloak as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Your response to any given situation, any circumstance, any opportunity for spiritual growth determines where your heart and where your treasure truly is. Because compare the hypotheticals that I gave you that none of us have experienced before. Compare those hypotheticals to the passage I just read. And if our heart was in the right place, if our treasure was focused on heaven and heavenly rewards and not earth, our response would look more like the passage I just read in chapter 5 rather than the hypotheticals that none of us can relate to, right? So I'm telling you that your why behind everything that you do has eternal consequences. If your eyes are focused on us, on me, on I, getting your dues, getting what you deserve, the recognition that you deserve, the money, we can throw money into it. The money that you deserve, the recognition, the love that you deserve. I mean, you could fill in that with any emotion or any desire that we could come up with. Or certain way based on the way they treat you. Big deal. The tax collectors do that, remember? So where is your treasure? What is important to you? Getting all that you deserve, even, and I'm not even talking about tangible stuff, right? Getting all the things that you deserve here on this earth. Or are you more concerned about heavenly rewards? The answer to that is how you deal with life circumstances and situations. If things don't go your way, now look, I'm going to step on a lot of toes, and if Lori was here, I would hear it all the way home. If things don't go your way, heaven forbid, right? Because you've got everything planned out in your life. If things don't go your way, and you get upset about that, are you more focused on this earthly deal? The things that you can control? Or is your response, Lord, what are you trying to teach me here? Maybe I don't know everything. Open my eyes to what you have for me. Because, and here's why I can see that. Go back to chapter 6, towards the very end. Verse 25, and we're going to talk about this next week. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Life is not life more than food, and body more than clothes? He's like, you've got to be kidding me. You worship an all-powerful, all-knowing, sovereign God, and you're really concerned about where your next meal is coming from? Don't you think I love you more than that? And just before that verse, just before verse 25, if we took out all the subtitles and sub things, it says, no one can serve two masters. Either they will hate the one or love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Therefore, so I have no problem relating everything that we've learned through the Sermon on the Mount to our rewards in heaven based on our attitude, based on our heart, the why behind absolutely everything we do. And then Jesus he transitions into the thought of money. This is so serious. I want you to understand how important this is. I believe that there is reason behind everything that happens to us. I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in chance. I don't believe in, luckily it worked out this way. Or, unluckily, this happened to me. It works both ways. You can't believe in the good stuff and just say, well, the bad stuff was just... God puts everything, every situation, every circumstance, I believe this, God uses or wants to use every situation and every circumstance to get us to be more like Christ tomorrow than we were today. And when we respond in a biblical manner, even if we just look at the last chapter and a half, the Sermon on the Mount, if we respond in a biblical way, in a biblical manner, We are storing our rewards in heaven. But if we continue to get upset when things don't go our way, if we continue to blame, there's a lot of blaming that goes on in our lives. If we don't take responsibility for our own actions, our own attitude, we're not going to see any rewards in heaven for anything that we've done. It's the heart that matters. The why behind everything we do matters. And we've got to understand this, or none of this stuff is even going to matter. It is so crucial for us to be more like Christ tomorrow than we were today by taking ownership of our own actions and attitudes, emotions, all that. Because in every circumstance, in every situation, God is trying to teach you something. So what is it that you need to learn? If that is your attitude, if that is your why behind all of this stuff, your rewards are going to be incredible in heaven. You're going to have so much to turn back over to Jesus when you die. But man, if we're more worried about our pride, if we're more worried about getting what we deserve, if our treasure is down here on earth and getting what we deserve, there's no treasures in heaven with that. We've got to take that seriously. We are not going to have an invitation after the service for a couple of weeks. And so what I want to do is I want to offer, I will stay up here how long anybody wants to. If you want to come up, you want to talk about anything, do anything, I will stay up here. But I'm going to pray, and then we're going to end our service. But I just wanted to let you know, I will be up here as long as anybody wants to talk about anything. Right? Okay? So let me pray. Lord, I just thank you so much. I thank you so much for this opportunity, and again, the freedom that we have in this country to do this still. I pray that we would never take that for granted in any way, shape, or form. Lord, I just pray right now that we would focus on the why behind everything that we do. Literally everything that we do. Every thought, every emotion, every action. That if we are not doing it to further the kingdom of God, to be more like Christ tomorrow than we were today, we will not be rewarded in any way for our actions. And that's a pretty bold statement. But Lord, I just pray that we would take that seriously, that we would understand that you are more concerned about the condition of our heart than anything else. And as we become more in tune, more in line with your will for our life and what you would have us do, that we would change our focus from the things down here, the recognition, the what we deserve, our attitudes, that we would focus less on that, and we would literally focus more on what you would have us do, how you would have us act, how you would have us respond to any situation. Because that's what's going to change our lives. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. All right, that is it. You are dismissed.